Hello and welcome to Ask You for a Trend. I'm Josh Lipton, and for the next half hour, we're breaking down the trends of today that'll move stocks tomorrow. There's a lot to keep track of, so we're focusing on what you need to know to get ahead of the curve. Here's some of the trends we're going to be diving into. It was a tough week on Wall Street. Even as stocks post gains on the day and close near session highs, we're diving into the trading day takeaways. President Trump hosting the first ever crypto summit just after he signed an executive order calling for the creation of a cryptocurrency strategic reserve. We're going to take you to the White House. That's straight ahead. Plus, the next buzzy tech trade beyond AI, quantum. After Google unveiled its quantum chip Willow at the end of 2024, that sparked plenty of interest. We've got a closer look at that technology and how you should think about investing around it. Well, the S&P 500 posts its worst week since September as Trump tariffs rattle markets. Yahoo Finance's Jared Blikre joins us now with the trading day takeaways. Jared.
Josh, it has not been a great week for a lot of risk traders. A lot of correlations have broken, and there's some strange things going on underneath the hood. The good news is we are up today. We're still above the 200-day moving average in the S&P 500, but I'm calling this regime change. And let me just go over the sector action real quick here. And you're going to see only healthcare is in the green for the week. We've got some pretty substantial declines in financials. Those are down almost 6%. Consumer discretionary, that's where you have Amazon and Tesla. Energy down 4%, and as I said, healthcare there, the lonely sector in the green.
It's Friday. We're heading into the weekend. I mean, can you give viewers something positive here?
I did say the 200-day moving average is still in play for the S&P 500. What I've done here is I've marked all the payroll days, all the non-farm payroll days like today, going back to September. And it's interesting. These days have marked reversals in the market. Not this one right here that I'm circling, but all these other ones, either up or down. And the good news, I think, is that right here, we're still above the 200-day moving average. And if we do have another reversal, well, that would be to the upside.
All right, Jared Blikre, point number 2.
The VIX won't quit, and let's get back to the VIX because this is doing something interesting. This has me a little concerned for the following weeks, and I'll tell you exactly why. The VIX a lot of times, and at least over the last few years, when it's spiked up, it has done so very quickly, and then it's come back down very quickly. That's not what's happening here. The VIX seems very comfortable with this ratcheting up, and that's just of a different character than, for instance, what we saw in early December. That's that spike over there. I can put a one-year chart. I can even show you the Yen-Mageddon. Really hard to see on your screen, I know that, but what I just circled there, that encompasses fewer days than we're currently seeing, and although we're not seeing as high a spike right now, it just concerns me a little bit that the VIX is camping out above 20, and it seems comfortable with that.
I know Jared's talking VIX. He's usually talking VIX seasonality.
Yes. Oh, thank you for reminding me. I do have that chart here. This is a VIX map of the entire year in white, and then in green we have what has happened so far. You're going to notice this latest spike is perfectly timed with the expectations. So the good news is in another week or two we should be heading down in the VIX. That would support an equities run, but we've still got a few more weeks in the mix. And I know we got a little bit of time here, just a little bit of time. China. We got to go to China. I was talking with Stephanie Aliaga of JP Morgan about this. China has been a bright spot in global equities this year. Here's what she had to say about it.
China tech, after 2 years of being in the doldrums, seems like it's coming out with a bang. And we were reminded that, despite whatever kind of constraints and barriers you can put on a company, those with the right incentives can figure out how to innovate around that. And I think that was really the big ingenuity that we had with DeepSeek. And now we have competition. Competition's good for the technology overall. Definitely makes things interesting from a market perspective.
So cheap AI, call it whatever you want. We've seen a lot of green action this week. This is the last 5 days, and I'll close with the year to date. Look at that, BABA up 65%. So some impressive price action there.
Weekend, what are you watching? A little Bitcoin?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just waiting for daylight savings time. I need that extra hour. That's it.
You deserve it.
Thank you,
buddy.
sir.
Appreciate it. President Trump hosting the first ever crypto summit at the White House. That's where we find our very own Jennifer Schonberger. Jennifer, what is the latest?
Hi there, Josh. As I was just in the room with President Trump as he touted the creation of a strategic Bitcoin reserve at the first ever crypto summit here at the White House, flanked by White House crypto czar David Sachs and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The president had this to say.
We're taking historic action to deliver on that promise, as you know, around the table. Yesterday, I signed an executive order officially creating our strategic Bitcoin reserve. and this will be a virtual Fort Knox for digital gold to be housed within the United States Treasury. That's a big thing, Scott.
And the room was full of crypto executives, members of Congress. Even SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce was in the House, someone who has lauded crypto and been in favor of it at the SEC. The president offered executives in the room the opportunity to weigh in on the actions that his administration is taking. At one point, White House crypto czar David Sachs pointed to the Winklevoss twins that were in the room. Apparently, Tyler Winklevoss had said a year ago he thought by now he would be in jail, instead praising the president and the administration for paving the way forward for innovation. The mood in the room very euphoric. Of course, the president last night signed a executive order creating the first ever strategic Bitcoin reserve. And this is a fund that will tabulate crypto that has been seized by criminals. They believe that the government owns about 200,000 Bitcoin at the moment, but they need to conduct a full audit. And that is something that the executive order is directing at this time.
Great
Josh.
reporting. Jennifer, thank you so much. Appreciate it. For more, we're bringing in now Gene Hoffman, CEO and president of Chia Network. Gene, it is good to see you. Maybe start high level, Gene. Listen, President Trump, he campaigned as a friend of crypto, an ally of crypto. He made promises. He's now making good on some of those pledges, Gene. Just as an industry insider, I'm curious to get your take on what you've seen so far from this administration. When it comes to crypto, are you impressed, Gene? Are you underwhelmed? Something in between?
So it's two things that really stand out. First of all, the lieutenants he's chosen are excellent. We're really excited about Bo Hines and David Sachs. They have brought real industry knowledge to the table. And, in our case, we've already been dealing with the SEC and had a good relationship in the prior regime, but recently had a meeting with the crypto task force there. And I can tell you it was the most productive meeting I've ever had with government ever. It is a sea change in the way that the entire U.S. government and then Wall Street and the banks are thinking about crypto and working with crypto.
What about this idea, this new strategic Bitcoin reserve, Gene? It didn't feel like investors were kind of wowed by that announcement. I'm curious to get your reaction response to it.
So I think there were folks hoping to get the United States government to buy their bags, and that's not necessarily a good idea. The idea of keeping the seized Bitcoin and using that as a reserve asset, that makes a heck of a lot more sense. And I think that actually underscores my point about how strong the lieutenants are. I see David Sachs's fingerprints all over that as an excellent solution to doing something that may have real value for the United States government, but certainly is not using taxpayer dollars to make what are outside of Bitcoin risky technology bets.
It did seem, though, Gene, that David Sachs, our cryptos, he did seem to suggest there could be a buying plan, though, Gene, if you could figure out a way to do it under, budget neutral conditions.
Yeah, they left that door open, and I think they're also looking at it as, those that are going to be seized from criminals will likely join Bitcoin. It has this perverse incentive, of course, that the best secure technologies may be the least seized by the government.
What are the benefits of such a strategic Bitcoin reserve, Gene? When you're explaining that to friends and family, what do you tell them?
Well, it's a hard call because the issue is that Bitcoin often goes up due to inflation, and frankly, the United States Treasury kind of controls what inflation looks like. So it's not clear that it necessarily does the same sort of thing as gold per se, but it's also clear that ultimately Bitcoin may very well be digital gold. And so to the extent that we keep some gold at Fort Knox, it doesn't seem completely outlandish to keep some Bitcoin at the Treasury.
What about, Gene, there are the critics, they say, listen, it's not an investment like gold, though. It's not a critical commodity like oil, and it's hyper volatile. Your counter to that kind of skepticism would be what?
I dare people to eat gold, right? There's always this kind of concept that gold is somehow special. And yes, it has had a special mimetic capability for history so far. It doesn't mean that we're not necessarily replace it. I mean, at some point, fire may be obsolete.
There are other governments with these kind of strategic reserves, Gene. You think about El Salvador. Are there any kind of lessons learned from those experiments?
Well, I think the most interesting one is actually Bhutan. They have tremendous amount of hydropower that's kind of geo-locked, if you will. And so they've gone heavy into Bitcoin mining with green energy and are then stockpiling that Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That makes a ton of sense for them. beyond that, you often get into the dollarization problem for other countries. If they're already dollar denominated, then Bitcoin kind of can work for them. But if they're not, Bitcoin can kind of force a dollar denomination depending on how much they buy, and that could be risky for some of the countries that otherwise kind of need inflation.
Gene, great to see you. Great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stick around. Much more Ask You for a Trend that's coming up right on the other side. Quantum computing, it may sound like a concept pulled from a science fiction movie, but the technology is real, and it's making its way through Silicon Valley, and nothing tech-related, we know, gets past Yahoo Finance's very own Dan Howley, and Dan joins us now to help break it all down. Dan.
Yeah, Josh, this is something, it does sound like something out of sci-fi or, I guess if you're old enough, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But it truly is a real technology. It's been around for decades, the ideas behind it, but now we're starting to see Silicon Valley companies really push further into it. And that's not to brush aside what IBM has done in the space or Intel has done in the space. Both have been working in quantum computing for some years, but now we have Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all coming out with their own quantum chip. But what is quantum computing? To break that down, let's just go over what classic computing is, what you're watching this on now, which is probably a smartphone or computer or maybe even a TV. They all have what are called CPUs or central processing units. And the way those work is using electrical pulses. Now, inside every CPU, there's millions or billions of what are known as transistors. And you can think of those as kind of switches. So every time an electrical pulse goes through one of the transistors, it's either on or off. Each on and off then represents, it's part of a binary code. That's basically a 1 or a 0. Now, all of these pulses go through your CPU millions and billions of times. Each time they go through, they'll go through a transistor. Those will go through other transistors, and they're interconnected. And so over the course of those travels, those ones and zeros eventually start to add up. Those ones and zeros are actually instructions. It's part of a machine language. And so what happens is they translate into the apps and games and streaming services that we all use. So it's just ones and zeros that you're looking at right now. It does everything from telling how to control the pixels on your screen to telling your computer, your printer to print, to letting you scroll or having your phone recognize your touch when you swipe on it. It's all just down to ones and zeros. Those are called bits. You've probably heard of megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes. Bytes are large numbers of bits, but the single individual unit is a bit. Now, let's talk about quantum computing. That's all part of classical. Quantum uses what's called qubits, quantum bits. It's QUBITS. It's completely different than classical computing. Rather than using electrical pulses, they're quite literally manipulating quantum mechanics. This is the stuff that scientists are still trying to understand, and so they'll use things like lasers or light particles, photons, or temperatures that are incredibly cold, down to near absolute zero, to manipulate these qubits. And rather than a 1 or 0, because of a quirk of quantum mechanics, they can be 1, 0, or any combination of the two at the exact same time. So it can be 1 and 0 at the same time. It's kind of like the idea of Schrodinger's cat. It's dead or alive, you just don't know until you measure it. And it's the same idea here with qubits. Now, why don't these computers exist at scale right now? Well, there's some issues with quantum computing. Namely, they generate errors. And what I mean by that is because qubits are so small, they're easy to damage. And so they're trying to figure out how to ensure they're not damaged easily. And so then we'll eventually have large-scale quantum computing and huge changes to chemical sciences and material sciences as well.
Dan, great to see you. Thank you for the report. Have a great weekend. Let's get back to Jennifer Schomburger at the White House with Bo Hines, Executive Director of the President's Working Group on Digital Assets. Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Josh. Bo, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
You were just at the first ever White House Crypto Summit as the director of the President's Working Group on Digital Assets. What did you think? What were your takeaways?
Well, I'll tell you this much. The optimism and energy in that room was palpable. I mean, under President Trump's leadership, we're certainly well on our way in ushering in the digital age the golden age for digital assets. President Trump has said that he wants to make the United States the crypto capital of the planet, and I think that we're going to do that. You saw in his first executive order on digital assets, which was a day 3 priority for the administration, he outlined what he expected from the working group, and we've come together with interagency, with industry, with leaders on the Hill to really put together an unbelievable plan of what we're going to do over the course of the next 60 days as we provide these recommendations to the president. That 60-day landmark is in that first executive order, and we're really excited about what is to come for this industry under this administration. We feel like this is an industry that's been beaten down and kicked down over the course of really the last decade and a half, specifically under the Biden regulatory regime. You look at Operation Choke Point 2.0, which stifled innovation and growth in the space, and the president made it very clear today that he is going to work to eradicate some of those regulatory rules that really just crushed industry here in the United States, and we look forward to onshoring a lot of different companies back in the space as well.
Bo, you just mentioned this is the first of hopefully many actions that you're going to be taking on this front. What can we expect from you next?
Well, I think the president outlined it very articulately today. He said that we're going to go after Choke Point 2.0 and that regulatory regime that really crushed innovation, made it hard for these luminaries to operate and really draw more attention to the United States digital asset regime. I mean, look, we're doing our utmost to ensure that we're leading the globe in terms of digital financial technological innovation, and I think today was a massive step in that process as we continue to work towards that goal.
As far as the creation of the first Bitcoin strategic reserve, do you think, given that it's such a volatile asset, that the crypto is such a volatile asset, that because the government is going to amass this asset and retain it, that creates stability for this asset class? Does it create sort of a floor on the price in essence?
Well, I mean, who knows? We'll see how the marketplace reacts to it. I mean, the cryptocurrency marketplace in itself is a volatile space, and we're not investment advisors, so I would encourage anyone that's thinking about investing in the space to consider talking to an expert before they do. With that being said, we view Bitcoin as being unique. It's a commodity, not a security. It has intrinsic stored value. It has the immaculate conception, right? There's no issuer, and we feel as if it's really important for the United States to have a reserve that captures that intrinsic value and puts us in the forefront of really technological innovation with other digital assets.
The executive order mentions that Secretaries Besson and Lutnick are ordered to look at ways to purchase more Bitcoin in a budget-neutral manner. Does the administration have a particular number in mind that it wants to amass when it comes to Bitcoin?
Well, I'll say this. The EO was very direct. It directed the Commerce Secretary and the Secretary of Treasury to look at those budget-neutral ways to acquire more Bitcoin in a way that wouldn't cost the taxpayer a dime, and I think that's very important. One thing that I'd like to point out is that under this administration with this president, he's working towards acquiring assets for the American people rather than taking it from them. In terms of an absolute number, I think that something that has intrinsic stored value, you want as much as you can get. So we'll see the ways that Secretary Lutnick and Secretary Besson come up with to ensure that we can acquire as much as we can.
This is an executive order that could potentially be reversed by a future administration. Is this administration calling on Congress to also pass legislation for the creation of a Bitcoin reserve so that it is more permanent?
Well, there's legislation currently in both chambers that are already working on this, and I think that we're very supportive of that. I mean, obviously, through executive order, it can be reversed. We don't want to see that happen. We need to make sure that these things stick, and I think that moreover, aside from the SPR, we're looking forward to stablecoin legislation. We're looking forward to market structure just to provide the clarity that the marketplace needs to continue to innovate and thrive. And those are conversations that certainly came up in the summit today, and we're looking forward to working with the leaders in both chambers to make these things happen.
Bo, thank you so much for your insight. That's all the time we have today, but hope to have you back again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Josh, I'll send it back to you in New York.
Thank you, Jennifer. Serve Robotics, an artificial intelligence-trained autonomous robot company, reported some weaker than expected sales for its latest quarter. Joining me now is discuss all this is Ali Kashani, Serve Robotics CEO. Ali, it's always good to see you. Let's get right to that earnings report. Q4 sales, you did 176,000, Ali. Street wanted to see something closer to 250,000. So walk us through the quarter. What are you seeing in the business?
Sure, yeah. I mean, look, we haven't provided guidance. So in terms of the entire year, our revenue grew 700% or more. And our focus is really putting 2,000 robots on the streets by the end of this year. So we are kind of getting ready for that big scale up. We're building 250 additional robots on top of the 100 we have already this quarter alone. 75 of them we actually managed to manufacture at the end of last year, right before the year end, ahead of schedule. So I feel pretty bullish in our plan and our ability to put these 2,000 robots out to use.
So demand right now that you're seeing from restaurants, Ali, from your third-party partners like Uber Eats, how would you characterize that demand? Is it healthy? Is it resilient?
Absolutely. We launched Miami a couple of weeks ago and immediately had 50 restaurants using our robots. Since I was in your studio just a few months ago, we've gone from serving 300 restaurants to more than 1,000 restaurants. So the demand is there. It's just a matter of building robots and putting them on the street.
You've talked about this rollout of 2,000 robots, Ali, by year end. What is sort of the cadence there, the schedule, the timeline, and what would be your ultimate goal? Is it 50,000 robots? It's 100,000 robots?
Yeah, look, it starts with build 250 of them of our newest generation robots, which, by the way, cost less than about a third of our last generation robot. Build 250 of them this quarter and get them rolled out next quarter. And then 700 more are going to be built in Q3, and then the rest of the 2,000 in Q4. And that's the plan for this year. We can probably get millions of these robots in the country, and there would be appetite for more because we're bringing the cost of delivery down from what it is today, which is about $10 for last mile transportation, down to hopefully $1 in a matter of a few years. The demand for last mile is going to go through the roof when you bring the cost down by such a significant amount. So I think there's going to be a ton of demand for building more robots and deploy them.
And where do you make these robots, Ali? Where do you assemble them? Is it here in the U.S.?
Yes, they're assembled in Michigan, actually, by Magna International, one of our partners.
Is there any kind of tariff risk for you all?
We've been fortunate so far, no impact. We had been kind of preparing for, being in a good spot given some of the geopolitics of what was happening. We don't have any exposure on Canada and Mexico side, and try to minimize our exposure on China side as well. So far so good. We are keeping an eye on it. It's changing very quickly. So hoping that we can minimize that impact through other cost cutting on the hardware side. But so far there hasn't been any impact.
Well, let's talk about your relationship with NVIDIA, Ali. We did learn that NVIDIA sold their position in your company. What can you tell us about that? Was it clear to you why they sold?
Well, I can't speak on their behalf. That's the first and most important thing. They did invest in Serve when we were a private company in 2021, 22, 23, and 24, right before our public listing. And then they recently exited the position after we became a public company. I think that's more of an investment decision. We have a very close technical partnership with them. That continues. It hasn't changed. And our robots are using those chips, including the robots we're building later this year. So in that sense, it hasn't really changed. It's more of a decision that they make on the investment side, which we really don't know anything about.
Ali, as you expand, you move into more cities. I'm curious how you make a decision of where you want to expand to. When you pick a city, what are the variables that go into that kind of decision making?
Yeah, it's a good question. First and foremost is the question of demand and the just demographic there. For example, we had not planned to launch Miami this quarter, but our partners came to us and said that they could really use us over there. So we took the opportunity and actually accelerated our timeline and put robots in Miami. We've also announced cities like Atlanta and Dallas. So we have a long list of cities that we can go to. But first and foremost, we want to work with our partners where they actually see the most use. We want to go there first.
It's always good to see you and to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. That is a wrap on today's Ask for a Trend. Be sure to come back Monday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern for all of the latest market-moving stories affecting your wallet. Have a great weekend.